So imagine you have a leaky pipe in your basement. What's your very first instinct?
Panic, usually.
Right, panic. And then if you are like most people, you immediately find a bucket and you shove it under the leak.
Mm-hmm.
You might even, go a step further and write this highly detailed manual for your family on exactly how to empty that bucket faster and more efficiently.
Right, a whole standard operating procedure for the bucket.
Exactly. But you never actually fix the pipe.
Yeah.
And, well, welcome to today's deep dive, because today we are looking at exactly that. Why our brains are seemingly hardwired to manage symptoms instead of engineering actual solutions.
It is a really fascinating trap we all fall into.
It really is. And to start, I want you, the listener, to consider a central and frankly pretty counterintuitive rule from the analysis we are exploring today. And that rule is never use the logic of the problem to solve it.
Yeah, which is a profound constraint to place on yourself. I mean, it gets right to the absolute heart of the paradox we're unpacking today.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at the mechanics of something called the ideal design approach. And this is, it's a framework utilized by high reliability organizations.
So we're talking like what?
Think nuclear power plants, aviation, top-tier healthcare systems, places that use this to create environments that are practically problem-proof.
Wow. Okay.
But the paradox we all face is that when something breaks, whether it's a massive corporate workflow or just a personal daily habit, our immediate instinct is to try and fix that broken system using the exact same assumptions, the same habits, and the same mental models that created the problem in the very first place.
We just completely double down on the same thinking. We just go out and buy a bigger bucket.
We do. We buy a bigger bucket and yell at people for not emptying it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is exactly our mission for you today. We are going to completely deconstruct this ideal design philosophy. And I promise by the end of this deep dive, you are going to look at every frustrating bottleneck in your work or even in your personal life completely differently. You are going to realize that simply telling yourself or your team to, just try harder is usually the absolute worst solution you could possibly reach for.
It really is. But before we get into how to design a perfect system, we kind of have to dissect the psychology behind why we reach for the bucket instead of a wrench.
Right. Why do our instincts fail us so consistently?
Well, the framework we are analyzing today labels this flawed instinct problem logic.
Problem logic. Okay.
Yeah. And it points out that problem logic is incredibly seductive.
Why is it seductive, though?
Because it feels like immediate action. It is entirely reactive. It waits for things to break, for the error to actually happen before it responds.
Right, you're not doing anything until the water is on the floor.
Exactly. It's also very linear. It focuses almost entirely on treating immediate symptoms rather than digging into the really messy, complicated root causes.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. So we are essentially confusing the management of a symptom with the actual resolution of a problem.
That's spot on.
Because, let's be honest, it is so much easier to just mop up the water than it is to tear open the drywall and replace the plumbing.
Oh, absolutely. It's the path of least resistance.
But there's something even more insidious about this problem logic, right? It fundamentally blames individuals.
It does, yes.
Like when something goes wrong in a complex system, the immediate reaction is almost always, who messed up?
Always. Who dropped the ball?
Right. And the solution it offers is just to constantly add more rules or more training policies or just blindly accept this really messy workaround.
Yeah, going right back to your basement analogy. When the homeowner eventually gets tired or, they fall behind schedule and the bucket overflows, problem logic yells at the homeowner.
For failing to follow the bucket emptying protocol.
Exactly. You are putting the burden of a structural failure entirely on the human operator.
Wow. Yeah.
And this traps organizations and individuals too, honestly, in a continuous loop of incremental band-aids.
Because you're never actually changing the structure.
Right. You are never achieving transformational change because you are just demanding that people work harder. Or stay more vigilant just to compensate for a fundamentally flawed structure.
Which is exhausting.
It is. The logic that created the problem cannot be the logic that solves it. You have to step entirely outside of those assumptions.
Okay, which brings us to a massive pivot here. If the old way relies on humans just trying harder to avoid mistakes, how do we actually escape the trap?
We shift the focus.
Right. The core shift here takes the focus off the human and places it squarely on the environment itself. There is this phrase from the source material that really anchors this entire philosophy. People don't fail. Systems fail.
That is the whole thing in a nutshell.
If human memory or human vigilance is the weak point, then the logical step is to just stop relying on memory entirely. You have to physically block the wrong action.
That is the absolute crux of ideal design. You are building a system where the right action is the default action, the safe action is the easiest action, and the harmful action is physically or systematically impossible.
Impossible. Not just against the rules, but impossible.
Exactly. Instead of adding more rules to govern behavior, which, let's face it, just adds cognitive load, ideal design removes complexity.
It streamlines it.
Right. It operates on the principle that reliability has to be actively engineered into the environment. It cannot just be hoped for.
Okay, wait. Let me push back on that for just a second.
Sure.
Because I know what some listeners are thinking. What does this all mean for accountability?
Ah, the accountability question.
Yeah. Because if you tell a team, or even if you just tell yourself, hey, people don't fail, systems fail, doesn't that just give everyone a massive free pass to make careless mistakes?
Sounds like it, right?
Like, if the system is to blame for everything, where's the personal responsibility to actually do good work?
It is a super common concern, but it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how accountability actually operates in a high reliability setting.
Okay, how so?
Ideal design is not about pretending humans do not make mistakes, or that negligence doesn't exist.
Right.
It is about recognizing a hard scientific truth. Human errors are entirely predictable.
Predictable.
Yes. We know humans get tired after a 12-hour shift. We know they get distracted by loud noises.
Of course we do. We're not robots.
Exactly. So true accountability, therefore, means taking responsibility for redesigning the conditions under which a person works.
Oh, I see.
It means leaders and, individuals designing their own lives must be accountable for ensuring that carefulness is literally built into the structure of the work itself.
That's a huge shift.
It is. Accountability shifts from, I demand that you be perfect, to, I am responsible for building an environment where your inevitable mistakes are caught before they cause harm.
Okay, I love that. So it's shifting from demanding an impossible character trait to actually engineering a reliable reality.
Exactly.
And theoretical frameworks are great, but let's ground this for the listener. What does making a harmful action impossible actually look like in practice?
Well, let's look at healthcare.
Yeah, the analysis dives into some very specific life and death applications in healthcare, where this design philosophy is heavily utilized.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of medication safety.
Okay.
Under the old paradigm, if there is a risk of a patient receiving a drug they are allergic to, the problem logic solution is a sign on the wall. Or a memo.
A really strongly worded email reminding staff to double-check allergies.
Yes. You are relying entirely on the memory of a busy, tired clinician.
Which we know is predictable failure.
Exactly. But under ideal design, the system protects the patient, not the memory of the clinician.
How?
Modern hospitals use an electronic medical record, or EMR, that actively blocks the medication order.
It's a digital wall.
Exactly. You literally cannot proceed in the software unless allergies are verified.
It takes the burden of memory completely out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of everyday examples we all use without even realizing it. Like, it's why a microwave will not turn on if the door is open.
Yes, perfect example.
Or why modern cars will not let you shift into drive unless your foot is physically pressing the brake pedal.
Right.
The car doesn't ask you to remember to be safe. It engineers the environment so you cannot be unsafe.
Precisely. And in the hospital setting, they take it even further with barcode administration.
Oh, right, the scanners.
Yeah. A nurse must scan the barcode on the patient's wristband and then scan the barcode on the medication vial.
And if they don't match.
If they do not match the digital order perfectly, the system throws a hard stop.
Right.
The carefulness is just built into the workflow.
Okay, so the EMR stops a bad prescription because it's a digital wall. You can just program a computer to say no.
Right.
But what about the physical world? I mean, you can't put a digital password on a slippery floor.
True.
How does ideal design work in a physical space?
Yeah.
The analysis brings up falls prevention in hospitals as an example.
Yes, falls are a huge issue.
Under problem logic, a manager just says, hey, watch the high-risk patients more closely. Again, rely on human vigilance. What does the alternative look like here?
Ideal design actually looks at the physical layout of the unit. You redesign the architecture itself.
The architecture.
Yeah, so there are clear sight lines from the nurse's station to the beds. You eliminate the blind spots entirely.
Oh, wow.
And you integrate bed alarms directly into the central monitoring system. So if a patient shifts their weight to get up, An alert triggers instantly.
Before they even stand up.
Exactly. And you install automatic floor lighting that turns on the second a foot crosses the edge of the bed. Plus, you use specialized non-slip flooring.
So the environment itself becomes an active participant in safety.
You've got it.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If you think about it, it's essentially bowling with bumpers.
Bowling with bumpers, I like that.
Like when you take a kid bowling. Problem logic is standing behind the kid, yelling at them to hold their wrists straight and try really, really hard to keep the ball out of the gutter.
Which never works.
Right. But ideal design is just inflating the bumpers. The bumpers don't ask the bowler to try harder. They physically bounce the ball back into play.
That is a great visual, though I will say the bumper analogy works for a simple static game like bowling.
Okay, fair.
But a hospital or a corporate office or, your daily life is not a static bowling alley. It is chaotic and constantly shifting.
That's true.
So the bumpers we design in the real world have to be highly dynamic. They can't just be inflated tubes. They have to anticipate failure in real time.
Like the bed alarm anticipating the fall.
Exactly. Ideal design is deeply proactive and error-resistant. It views human fatigue or distraction as a statistical inevitability, not a moral failing.
All right.
You aren't hoping the ball stays out of the gutter. You are designing a lane where the gutter dynamically closes itself off the moment a ball veers off course.
Okay, that makes total sense for physical things.
Yeah.
A barcode scanner prevents a wrong medication. Non-slip flooring prevents a fall. Dynamic bumpers prevent an error.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move into the intangible stuff, because this is where the framework gets really ambitious, I think.
It does.
Can you actually engineer intangible human dynamics, like workplace communication or staff burnout? I mean, you can't put a barcode scanner on a conversation.
Well, no, you cannot attach a scanner to a conversation, but you absolutely can engineer the structure of that conversation.
How do you mean?
Failed communication is just as dangerous as a medication error in a complex system. Problem logic handles communication by simply declaring staff should communicate better.
Oh, man. Just be more clear. We hear that in every corporate retreat ever.
And it fails every single time.
Yeah, it really does.
Because it treats communication as a soft skill or a personality trait that people just need to magically improve upon.
Right.
Ideal design, on the other hand, treats communication as a rigorous, engineered system.
Okay.
It removes the ambiguity by embedding standardized tools into the workflow. For example, hospitals use a framework called SBR.
SBR. What does that stand for?
It stands for Situation, Background, Assessment, Recommendation. It is a mandatory standardized format for all handoffs. When a nurse changes shifts, they don't just, casually chat about the patient.
They don't just say, oh, Mr. Smith is doing okay.
Exactly. They deliver information strictly through those 4 sequential buckets.
So it provides an exact template.
It does. And beyond just formatting information, Ideal Design engineers the social dynamics too.
The social dynamics.
Yeah. The framework utilizes programs like TeamStep PS, which embeds cross-monitoring directly into daily operations.
What's AEO's cross-monitoring?
It basically means actively engineering permission for a junior nurse to stop a senior surgeon.
Oh, wow.
It is not just a memo saying, speak up if you see something. It is a structural protocol where critical procedures literally cannot proceed until the junior staff verbally clears the next step.
That's fascinating.
Communication is no longer left to chance or hierarchy or personal style. It becomes a rigid, reliable system.
Okay, I have to hold my ground here and play devil's advocate for a moment.
Go for it.
Doesn't this start to feel a bit, restrictive, even dehumanizing?
How so?
If I am forced to use a rigid acronym to talk to my coworker, or if every human interaction has to follow a mandatory checklist, I feel like we are losing the essential human element.
I hear that a lot.
It just sounds incredibly robotic to turn human communication into a highly regulated algorithm.
It is a completely understandable friction to feel when you first encounter these systems. Absolutely no one wants to feel like a meat robot reading off a script.
Exactly.
But think about the invisible reality of a poorly designed system. Think about the massive cognitive load on a nurse or a manager in an unstructured environment.
Okay.
All of their mental energy is spent just trying to hold the broken system together. They are constantly trying to decode unclear communication from a colleague. They're terrified of making a mistake, constantly trying to remember unwritten rules.
They are essentially bailing water out of the leaky pipe.
Exactly. And that is exhausting. By making the system hold itself together, By utilizing those rigid communication structures and standardized checklists, you are entirely removing that immense cognitive pressure from the tired staff.
Oh, I see.
The checklist removes the cognitive burden of how to say something, so you can focus entirely on what you are saying and who you are saying it to.
Wow.
It actually frees humans up to be truly present, to show empathy to a patient, or to apply deep critical thinking to the rare exceptions.
Because they aren't stressed about the baseline.
Exactly. The underlying system is reliably handling the baseline safety load. When structure takes care of the routine, humans are liberated to actually handle the complex.
Okay, I see that. The structure creates the freedom.
Yes.
So how does this philosophy tackle workload and burnout? Because right now, the universal problem logic answer to burnout seems to be manage your time better or practice more self-care.
Which is so frustrating.
We tell people to go do yoga to fix a systemic resourcing issue.
Which is the ultimate expression of blaming the individual for a system failure. Ideal design flips that completely. It refuses to view burnout as a failure of individual resilience. Instead, it looks at the mechanisms of the workload itself.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, it utilizes staffing models based on actual patient acuity rather than just arbitrary headcount.
Break down how acuity actually changes things on the floor. Because, saying we need 5 nurses for 5 patients sounds perfectly logical until you actually look at the patients.
Right. Headcount assumes every patient requires the exact same amount of work.
Which they don't.
No, they don't. If you have 5 patients with minor fractures versus 2 patients in critical, highly unstable condition, the workload is vastly different.
Right.
Acuity-based staffing calculates the literal hours of direct care each specific patient requires based on their actual condition.
Oh, so it's a data-driven approach.
Exactly. You staff for the hours of care needed, not the number of bodies and beds. It aligns the resources directly with the reality of the work.
That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, ideal design requires aggressive workflow redesign to physically eliminate unnecessary steps that waste time. And it mandates the automation of repetitive, low-value tasks.
It takes the busy work away.
It does. The mantra is uncompromising. Reduce the load, do not increase the pressure.
So as we pull all these threads together, what is the ultimate conclusion we are driving toward here?
Well,
The overarching goal of ideal design, at least from the analysis, is summarized as zero harm by design.
yes.
It is the profound realization that we have to fundamentally stop trying to fix problems with the same reactive, individual blaming logic that created them in the first place. We have to start redesigning the world that produced those problems.
That is the pivotal takeaway from everything we've unpacked today. You do not fix problems by demanding better people. We redesign the conditions under which the work is done. It is the permanent shift from a culture of try harder to a strict discipline of design better.
I love that. I really want to challenge you, the listener, right now as we wrap up this deep dive. Look closely at your own life today. Look at your team, your workspace, your daily routines. Where are you currently putting a bigger bucket under a leaky pipe? Where are you just adding more rules, sending more aggressive email reminders, or relying purely on your own sheer willpower to get through a bottleneck?
We all do it.
We do. Where are you yelling at yourself to try harder instead of redesigning your environment to make success the absolute default?
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building directly on that challenge.
Yeah, please.
If this ideal design philosophy proves that bad outcomes in complex organizations are overwhelmingly the result of bad system design rather than bad people,
Right.
to what extent are our own personal failures actually just poorly designed personal environments?
Oh, wow.
Think about your biggest daily struggle, whether it is your productivity, your health, or your ability to maintain focus. What if that struggle is not a lack of discipline?
What if it's not a moral failing?
Exactly. What if it is not some deep character flaw? What if it is simply you operating in a personal environment that was inadvertently, secretly engineered for you to fail?